Today we're going to be talking about how to make your life more interesting, why many people live boring lives, how I made my life from boring to interesting, and some tips on how to actually find fulfillment and happiness, on whether or not making my life more interesting actually helped. Right now I'm in Savannah, Georgia. This is my 4th day here. I've been traveling the country and I've been able to make my life more interesting by visiting a new city or town of my own volition every few weeks. And so, has that really been as fulfilling as I expected? What actually brings contentment? We'll get into all of this. Let's start with a quick story about my life, and we'll start with how life is for most people and how my life started. So, after college, most people's lives go, you wake up, you go to work, you eat some food, you exercise at a gym, then you go home, watch some TV, you go to sleep, and you rinse and repeat day after day. Fairly boring, right? And that was my life for a good many years after college. And it was kind of boring, to be honest. And I wanted something different. I strove for something different, but I lived in a small town area, and there wasn't really that much to do, but I knew I wanted something more. And I think one part is that I saw on social media, and it's a bit of a brainwash expectation, because no one's really living this. This is just their highlight reel. But you see people traveling the country or traveling the world and just living really cool lives. And you start to expect that, or you start to feel like you need that to be happy or successful. Spoiler alert, you don't. But that's what people assume. And so at that time, I felt like I needed something more interesting. I didn't necessarily need to travel that much. I would love to, but I needed something more interesting. So I did everything I could to make my life more interesting. And here's just a small sample of all the different things I've done over the years. I ran the Tough Mudder race, which is like a obstacle course marathon. I've gone acro yoga. I've done acro yoga. I joined a sailing league. I did a beach volleyball league. I got really into CrossFit. Did CrossFit for 5 years, 4 to 5 days a week, including volunteering and participating in some local competitions. I traveled to Southeast Asia on my vacation time. I built a podcast, a blog, a YouTube channel. I interviewed various successful people, from the author of the Bruce Lee biography all the way to Timothy De La Ghetto, currently known as Chanto Rangsu, one of the first OG YouTubers, still very successful. And I've done a lot more than that. I launched a physical product to sell on Amazon. I have gone to all sorts of crazy dance classes, Zumba class, bachata, zouk, salsa. I've gotten pretty good at all those dance forms. I'm starting to get into hip hop dance now. I learned the BTS dance. I could go on and on about all the things that I have done to make my life more interesting outside of work hours. Now, the point being, I did all that, and now I'm traveling the country. And the question is that worth it? Is it more fulfilling? Because I think that's what we really care about. Living a more interesting, fulfilling life. And here's what I gotta say. Some parts have been very fulfilling. Other parts, they're not as much as what you would expect. And I think the first tip for you is choose something that you do for yourself, not for other people. Now, for myself, I really wanted to get out of my hometown area and see the world. And for those reasons, seeing new places like here and mountainous ranges in Virginia or North Carolina, those things have been very fulfilling because I did it for myself. But there were times where part of me did things for others. I wanted other people to say, hey, that's really cool. Let's have a deep conversation about why you did that and where. And those moments have been unfulfilling to me. I remember a couple of times where at the, workplace lunch table, I told someone, hey, yeah, I just pulled a $2,000 truck at my CrossFit gym with a rope on my own. Or, hey, I just went and did this crazy solo adventure to the remotest parts of the Philippine Islands. Or I just ran a Tough Mudder, and the result was not what I expected. It was just like 20 seconds more of conversation on the topic, because the truth is, most people don't really care about that. They don't care about you, they care about themselves. So I don't know, it wasn't just as fulfilling as I would expect it, because I expected, oh, they'd be so interested, they would see me as a cooler, more interesting person, but it really wasn't. They're just like, okay, that's cool. They asked a couple questions, move on to the next topic for the day. And it was like, wow, they don't really care. And so if you're doing something, do it for your own fulfillment. I don't care if anyone knows about my travel adventures, which is why I'm not really posting a ton of it on social media. And therefore, I'm fulfilled because I'm doing it for myself. I really wanted to see the world, and I have been, and that's why. And so that's one part of it. Another part of my adventures and my thoughts and tips is realize that what you do doesn't have to be this grand magnitude or happen all the time every day for you to have an interesting life. Now, what do I mean by that? Think about this. People think that they need to be living on yachts or flying across the world and partying it up like Los LeBlanc to really succeed or have a good life because of social media, when they're really just posting the highlights. Even those types of people, most of their day is spent setting up the shot, doing work that they don't want to do. Even Elon Musk or Dwayne Johnson, a lot of their day is pretty repetitive. You just see the glamour shots. Sure, their lives might be more interesting than you, but most of it is just not as great as you would expect. And so get rid of the notion that you need to do all these crazy highlight things every day to live a fulfilling life. So my tip for you is to realize that you can get a lot of fulfillment and meaning or interest just from the small things in your life. Whether that's being a good bigger brother or volunteering with the local community nearby. I was recently in Georgia, Atlanta, and I volunteered for this organization that harvests all these fruit plants, mostly peaches, but plums and apples, they have those too. And because if we didn't harvest them, they are public trees, so most of the fruit just rots and goes to waste. And so that was interesting. It was new to me, it was fresh, but it was also fulfilling to kind of help back and prevent the waste of all these fruits. So there's a lot of small and big things. Don't think you have to be paragliding across the Swiss Alps and then landing in a Lamborghini to have an interesting life. Honestly, a lot of that, when you study the science of happiness, doesn't really keep you motivated. There's something called hedonic adaptation, where all that superficial flashy stuff, you get used to it and it doesn't boost your happiness as much as you think. So I think the last tip and the last thing I want to end on is you define your own interesting life. And sometimes you have to learn the hard way. Like, you might not believe me or believe anyone else until you yourself are actually doing those interesting things and realizing, oh man, that's not as great. Or maybe you will find, oh yeah, they are as interesting or as fun as you think. But for me, I've learned all sorts of stuff while traveling. I've learned that, hey, too much of this is just like, it can be too much. I do like some stability, and I don't want to do this forever. I want to settle down one day in one place. It's just too much to be constantly on the go, and there's downsides to having a minimalist, travel suitcase, and that's all you have when you're going. Like, I kind of like to have a steamer around and an air fryer, So you define what you want to be interesting, but chances are you probably don't need as much as you're picturing or imagining in your head to have an interesting life. Yeah, it definitely helps to have an interesting life because I guess, it'll impress people. People will see you as unique or different from the average person. But at the same time, do it for yourself. Don't do it too much for other people because you'll become an empty shell of yourself and not get as much contentment or happiness as you need. And don't feel like you have to wait until your retirement or find this dream passion, and that's the only way to experience this interesting, fulfilling life. In honesty, you can get peace, happiness, contentment from small things. Just like living in a area with some good nature, like just going on a hike. Like I went on a hike and I walked across a mountain, and it was very affordable, but that was just fulfilling and interesting to me. Try new things. I tried all these different things and I got out of my comfort zone. Most people just stick to one hobby, rock climbing, and that's it. But I just kept trying new things because they were different, they were unique, they were outside of my comfort zone, and eventually a few things stuck that I prefer and I like, whether that's a sword fighting thing or whatever. But the point is, try out and figure out what you want to do, what's interesting to you, and just realize you probably don't need that much. So yes, getting a job that is a 0 out of 10 in interest to a 5 out of 10 or 7 out of 10, that'll probably do a lot. You don't need to get it to a 10 out of 10 to really get there. And then in your free time, rather than something that's 0 out of 10, like going to the same boring old gym, at least once or twice a week, try something new out that is in your area, that is interesting to you. I bet you if you do some digging, and I did a lot of digging, I would drive sometimes an hour away to try something that actually ended up being something that ended up being very interesting to me, whether that was a Zoot class or something else. And it requires getting out of your comfort zone. It requires, for me, a motivation to just get away from a boring life. And I was so sick of a boring life that's what did it for me. I just needed something more interesting. And when you have all that, over time, you'll make short-term and mid-term progress. And then the long-term progress, those are usually require bigger overhauls, like job changes and so forth. But yeah, sometimes you don't need those big overhauls unless the city you live really sucks. So you can really start to change your life, and I hope with all these tips you can live a more interesting and probably what's more important, a more fulfilling and happy life. Making your life more interesting is not impossible. Anyone can do it if they're motivated enough and they're just sick enough of their boring life. From personal experience, even if you live in a small area, if you do enough digging and research, there's plenty of things that you can find through stuff like meetup.com that you can get into, whether they're classes or events, and you'll be surprised. I've joined all sorts of crazy stuff like African drum circles, things that I would have never even considered or known existed. So if you keep trying these things, you will slowly start to expand your repertoire of things that you've done. Even if it's just one thing a week or one thing a month, over time you will start to develop a more interesting life, especially if you start to get involved in these communities. But keep in mind, you don't need to have this crazy, bombastic, interesting life to live a happy, fulfilling life. I've learned that the hard way through personal experience. Hope you enjoyed. See you in the next video.